Hi everyone, it's Justine here from House of Mahalo. Thanks for joining me. So I'm back with my altered book journal, and today we're going to do a window page. So what I've done to prepare is I've inked around all of the pages like normal, and this is what I'm going to be using for the window for this one. So this is just something from my stash. It's essentially a card making thing, which has this really nice window in the front. So I want to do something with that, and I'm thinking about trying to make some kind of like shutters or something. So that is the plan. And for window pages, so first things first, you don't need to have something like this. If you look back on some of the other window pages I've done in this book, there are various different ways to do it. So this one I used just like a frame die thing. I think the autumn page was literally just me cutting through the page, if I can find it. So in this case, the digital is the frame. So it doesn't have to be something as fancy as this. It's just I've got one, so I'm thinking I may as well use that just to change things up a little bit. But yeah, essentially the process of a window page is you have, so this is the normal page. So if I show you, so we turn, this is our page. We then have this where we've torn out the pages. We're going to cut through this front page all the way through there, but not through here. We don't want to have the window or the hole right the way through this back page, just this one sheet. So to start with, I'm going to go ahead and glue my digital down. I may very well add more paper to the background, but for now I'm just going to get this glued down, because the idea being is that we only want to cut once. We don't want to have to cut multiple times. So by covering up the page with what you want to use first, when we cut the window, we're going to cut right the way through this digital and that first page that I just showed you, rather than having to cut a hole and then cut another hole. Like, you don't want to be doing that. We just want to cut once. So do that. I can do all the finicky gluing after, just as long as we've got it down in, you know, more or less where you want it. So that's what I'm using. So I'm just going to put that to one side because I need to prepare my window. So obviously I'm using this, which is too wide for my page, and also I don't want it to flip out. I want to add shutters instead. So I'm just going to prepare this by just cutting on the inside of this crease. So I'm going to keep that for something else, not necessarily in this book, but just in general. So now we've got this, and I want to cut it down in width as well so that it fits my book. So what I'm going to do is grab a ruler. I just want to measure how wide this is. It's about 1/2 inch. So on the other side, I'm going to cut 1/2 inch. Yeah, more or less. Doesn't have to be exact, as I said. I do most things by eye. Occasionally I measure, and even then I sort of get confused about what I'm doing with the trimmer once I've measured it. So do as I do, don't bother with your measuring, just do things by eye and it will all work out. So that's what I'm going to have there. So what I'm going to do is just hold that in place where I want the window, which I like the idea of coming in just a tad so we can see this little bit of fence. And I've got to think about the fact that I'm going to have these little shutter things which are going to open up if all goes to plan. So I'm going to come in a little bit from the top and the side here. And what I'm going to do is just very loosely just draw around my window frame in pencil so that we can rub it out. Doesn't have to be exact, I'm just getting an idea of where my window is. So that's my shape of the window. And then what I want to do is I want to cut just outside of that line. So I'm just going to very crudely just make a little bit of a border around it. So I've probably come out, I don't know, what's that, a few millimeters. You don't have to come out by much. So just a little bit bigger than the inside of the window. And then the only thing I would say is you don't want to come, so where I've got this big rectangle, so this big shape, I don't want to be cutting outside of this. So where I did an extra couple of millimeters, can you see that? If I were to just draw you a line quickly here, that's going to be, the window is going to be covered by, you know, my frame by quite a bit. So we've got this extra bit here. Can you see that? So that's where my window is going to be, and then we've got this bit extra from the actual cardstock piece, which is going to cover all of that up. So it's up to you how you go about doing your window. I'm going to start things off with a craft knife and a ruler. So as I said, I'm cutting roughly along that outside line. And what you want to get is just something to put underneath this first page, so slotted in there. So we've just got the digital plus the book page. And this is just a book cover, so it works perfectly fine. It's nice and thin, so I can get it into the book easily, but whilst keeping a flat surface. And then I'm just going to use my ruler and carefully, just going to cut along there. As I said, you're only going through that first bit, so the digital plus the book page. So what you want to do is just take your time with it, you know, go slow, go nice and easy with it. If you don't like the idea of using a craft knife, then what you can do instead is just put a sharp pair of scissors through the one page and then just cut around it. But I'm going to use this to start with, just to get me going, and I can always get the scissors out after if I need it. Now, because this is going to be hidden by the frame, so my actual window, don't worry if it's not going particularly straight. It does not need to be perfect at all, because you're not going to see this. All I say is you just want to be careful that what you're doing is you're going through that first digital and the book page only. You don't want to be going through anything else. Okay, and then because that's a bit of a curved line there, I'm going to put the craft knife away and then I'm just going to carefully cut around the remainder here, like so. So yeah, as always with all these things, take your time with it, bit by bit, and we'll have a nice window. So there we are, I have my window in, and as you can see it's really not neat at all, and that's fine because all of that will be hidden. So don't forget, we've just gone through that one first page. Everything else is all intact, just that little window here. And then when we put the frame over the top, whatever you're using, you can see there how all of that ugliness, non-neatness, messiness, etc., that's going to be hidden by our lovely window. Which is the nice thing is actually with this, you can actually see this sort of like, I don't know, is that Rome or Florence or somewhere? That would have been a really nice thing to have, but I'm actually going to be using something in the window as my digital. So from here, if you're just doing your window, you can go forward and put your plastic in, just like we have been doing on the other window pages, and your picture. And then again, all of this inside is going to be hidden by when we glue the pages together. So what I'm going to do first of all is go forward and use this plastic. So this is just one of these like mailer type bags that you sometimes get, you know, cards in or something. So I'm just going to use one layer of it. So let me just cut off a piece. The reason that I use this is because it's nice and thin, especially with only using the one bit of it. So you don't need to use anything, you know, thick or heavy or bulky. Stuff like this is just nice and thin. There we go. Again, very crude cutting. I'm just going to cut that down a bit smaller. The thing with plastic is it's very difficult to see. So let's just cut off a piece. So that's going to go in there. So I think I can go ahead and just get that glued on. So I'm just going to just follow around my window with my glue. So I'm using my Cosmic Shimmer first, but then I'm also going to get out my beacon or 3-in-1, Fabri-Tac, that sort of stuff, just because it glues a little bit better than anything else when it comes to plastic surfaces. So I'm just using both for good measure, but I'm keeping out of the window. I don't want this glue to go seeping absolutely everywhere. So I've done a very thin layer so that I can just get that into position. There we go. And then for the rest of it, I can come in with just a little bit more glue just to get these pieces. Around here, I can be a little bit less careful because I'm well away from the window now with these little bits here. But it's just when you're going around that window frame, you don't want the glue to go seeping out, smear your window. We don't want dirty windows. And you know, go through to the page behind. We don't want any of that. So, you know, go easy. But now you've got this nice little, you know, shiny window frame type thing. And you can put your picture in the window. So I'm going to be using this from my garden kit, because through there I'm thinking that's looking really nice, where I've got some of the pink flowers, I've got a little bit of a shed or greenhouse, we've got something up here which is, I don't know, like an arbor, and it's a scrap, which is always helpful to use. So I'm going to grab my ruler and just tear very crudely down the side here, because I don't need to be fully in the spine with this. I just need it to be big enough to fill my frame. Okay, so if I were going to go somewhere there, again, I don't need it to be as wide as that. So to save bulk, I'm just going to tear down here, like so. Keep that scrap, that's a nice scrap. And then I'm just going to tear a bit off the top. There we go. So that should be fine. And then I've got room to wiggle around and maneuver it to get it where I want it to be. Sort of thing. I'd like those pink flowers to be at those bottom corners there. Let's just check how that's looking, see what we think. Yeah, lovely. Okay, so I can go ahead and glue this down. So I'm just going to grab some glue on the back here, and I'm just going to hold it in place. And I'm just looking through the window to see where to glue it. There we go. And I'm just gluing it on the back page here, like that. There we go. So once that's all closed up, you won't see any of this. That will all be hidden, and then we've got the nice little frame going on. Yeah, lovely. So I'm going to put that to one side for now, because I'd like to work on my window shutters. So here's what I'm using to make my shutters. It's a Stamperia scrapbook paper, which has got this really nice green fence and roses detail. So really nice for like wooden shutters, summery, gardeny, that type of thing. So I roughly cut it to be the height of my whole rectangular piece here. So this is the whole thing that I want to cover with my shutters. There's a little bit of a gap over here. That's just because I need to trim it down to size, but essentially it's the height of the whole piece. And then in terms of width, so my whole frame is pretty much exactly 3 inches, and I would like to have the shutters cover the whole window, and then each of the pieces want a little bit of an extra so that they can flip open as little window shutters. And this here, so this window, this white bit here, that's about 1/2 inch. So I can't have flaps or hinges that are wider than that, because you would see them through the window. So what I want to do is just come a little bit narrower than that. So I'm thinking, rather than it be 1/2 inch, it will be 1 less than 1/2 inch on each side. So in order to cut this piece out, I need the width of the frame plus my 2 hinges. So if we're doing just shy of a ½ inch, that would be like 3.8 inches. I'm not very good with inches, so I know that's not the exact measurement, but you know, 2 less than 4. And then I want to have a little bit of an overlap so that I don't have a funny gap down the middle. I'd rather that the window shutters just overlap slightly. So I'm going to add an extra 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to cut this at 3.9. This piece, I'm going to cut this piece at 3.9 inches wide. So I want to keep that rose detail. So let's find 3.9. So it's not really 3.9, it's really just one less than 4. So I'm going to go at 10 centimeters. I think that should be plenty. So let me just check that. So what I want is essentially almost an inch clearance, just shy of an inch extra. Yeah, that looks to be about right. Okay, and then I want to cut this in half so that I've got 2 pieces. So I'm going to cut this in half lengthways. So that will be just shy of 2 inches for each piece. So if I hold that there, it's essentially going to do something like this and then open up. So yeah, I think that's working just fine. So that's the cutting part. With measurements and things, it's difficult because we don't have the exact same stuff. Just take your time with it is what I would say. So I'm doing slightly less than a ½ inch to make sure that the flap is hidden by my window. So there's my ½ inch and I'm going 1 in. So what you want to make sure is that you're getting the hinges on the right side for each piece. So on this side, this is my right hand shutter. I want the hinge to be on the right hand side so it opens up this way. So I'm going to flip it over so I've got the back facing me. And there's my ½ inch. I'm going one less than that. Go that side so I can hold it better. There we go. So that's my little flap on that one. And then this is my left hand shutter. We want the hinge on the left hand side. So again, flipping it over and going 1 less than a half. So when we pop those in, so let's just fold those over and just check how we're looking. So that's what I meant by once the hinge goes on the back here, it's hidden. It's not wider, it's not coming through the window, it's less than the back piece. And then we've got our other shutter, which is going to go like that. Let's see. Somewhere there. So there's just the teensiest little bit. There's like, can you see that how there's some overlap there just by teensiest little bit. I would have preferred that. I didn't want it to be like they were slightly open like this. I didn't want any of the window to show through. So for me, I would prefer that just that little bit of a lip overlap. All right, so that's my little shutters. So the next step is to decide whether you want to cover up the back of this or not. So originally I thought I was going to cover up the terracotta, but I actually quite like it and it goes really well with the green picture that I've chosen for my window. So I'm going to actually keep the terracotta. I think that's quite a nice bit of colour. And it, you know, skips a step as well, which is always a plus, but I would only do that if you like the back of it. So keeping the terracotta. But what I'm not such a fan of is that this brickwork and this line is at the top versus this way round. So I'm actually going to flip my shutters, yes, so that we've got this piece at the bottom. And that for me is perfectly fine. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these on. So we're adding some glue just to these little hinges that we've created. So just on that part. And we're just going to hold this in place around our window frame that we've got here. And I'm just lining it up with the bottom down here so I can cut off the top piece when I'm ready. And I'm just going to glue that on the back there. Okay, and then same on the other side, just gluing that little hinge flap part. And then slip that into place. Now I will add the shutters, especially with measurements and cutting and all the rest of it. It does add a bit of complexity, so just bear that in mind. But if you would like to add a little bit of interactivity to your journal and also just a little bit of an interesting detail, then having these opening shutters is a nice little thing that you can do with your window pages. But as I mentioned, I haven't done this with any of the other seasons. The other ones were a lot simpler. So, you know, you just decide how you want to go about doing it, whether you want that added complexity for something different or whether you don't, it's totally up to you. So now it's just a case of me just chopping down in height. So I just need to get rid of this extra bit here. So I'm just going to cut along the whole thing. Like so, and then I've just got a little bit at the bottom where I didn't glue it perfectly where I was supposed to. So there we go, chop that whole bit down. And that is my little window shutters. So yeah, just a fun little extra thing that you can do if you want to, but you absolutely don't have to. So this whole piece can now get glued in, like so. So before I glue this down, I'm just going to go over with my brush, just to take some of the whiteness away. I don't want to, you know, completely lose the fact that it is a white window frame, but I just want to add maybe just a little bit of like vintage or grime dirt to it, you know, not perfectly white windows. And I'm just using the back of a digital here just to go over these bits. And I'm just using what's on my brush just to give it a light going over, like so. And then what I think I will do as well is just go over it with just a swirly stencil. Actually, I might use this one that looks a little bit like tiles. And that will be just a little bit darker. So just, you can see just hints of it. Can you see that? So it almost looks like somebody's, you know, painted their window or something with this nice stencil. And again, I'm not doing it particularly, you know, dark or anything, just a little bit of a hint of the pattern. There we go. Yeah. And where I'm using the tea dye ink, it goes quite nicely with the terracotta as well. So I think that works quite well. And then just for the last step with this window, I'm just going to ink just along the top here, just along the bottom here. And then I'm just going to come, carefully on the inside of my window panes. Look at me using all the proper words, just to darken those up a bit. There we go, that's my window. Very happy with that. Let's move those bits out of the way. So now we can just go ahead and glue this whole bit inside. And then from there, we can do all the fun decorating part. So I am going to, so I don't want to glue my shutters closed. So I'm being very careful. Just with this glue, with a small nozzle, I'm just coming along the inside of that crease, just along here. Don't need heaps and heaps of glue, you know, it's gonna take, but I am just gonna take a little bit, teensy amounts, just along these panes as well, just to make sure that they don't pop up at any point. Small amounts of glue. Okay, all right, I'm just going to stand up to make sure I'm getting this in the right place. Just making sure all the little bits are glued down. Make sure my window is clean. And there we go. So it goes that way. That's the little lip. So I'll probably decorate them in such a way as to have something that will keep them closed, so they don't just keep popping up. You can also go over it with a bone folder just to help them lay a bit flatter, so I can do that. But either way, they're going to want to, you know, kick up a little bit. So I'm thinking when it comes to the decorating phase, we could have something that holds them down. And then the other sort of idea I had, I'm just going to share it with you. I'm not going to do it, but it was an idea I had, was you could put some brads through the front cardstock here to make them look like little handles. The only difference with that is you would have to cover up the brad legs on the other side here. So if I had been covering up this terracotta, then I would have added the handles so that this would have been covered up as well as the brad legs. But because I decided to keep this, I decided not to do that. But I'm just sharing the idea with you in case it's something that you would want to add to your journals. So yeah, that is my window shutter frame piece. So from here now, we can go ahead and decorate the rest of this page spread. Now for this side, I'm going to be using, the digital that I was just stenciling on the back of. So this is what I'm using. So we've got some of the roses repeated. And then this way, the green of the window and all of this can stand off against the more plain background. That's what I was thinking. Whereas if this had been a lot like brighter, I thought maybe it was going to be too much. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. And then yeah, I want to do some kind of decorating. So I'm going to hit pause whilst I have a think about what I'm going to do, and then we'll do the decorating together. Okay, so a bit of decorating then. I've had the coolest idea. So I was looking around my bits and bobs to try and find something that would hold these shutters closed. Originally I was thinking something like this, where, you know, part of the butterfly's wing or part of a flower, whatever it is, would allow this piece to open up, and then this would open. The issue with that, as you can see, is that your fussy cut can then be seen on when you open up the shutters, which is fine, but you know, not the neatest way to do it. So I was umming and ahhing about what to do, and I came up with the idea to have magnets. So these are just some very, very thin magnets that we just had in our toolbox, but they seem to have worked really well. And I basically put together a few fussy cuts under Word. This is 2 layers of cardstock. So I glued my embellishments onto a piece of scrapbook paper, cut around it, and then glued it back again, cut around it. So that's the same green as this here. So that's 2 layers of cardstock. You can see the magnet. I was umming and ahhing about whether to have the magnet hiding inside 2 layers of cardstock, but I actually don't mind that you can see the magnet. I think it looks kind of cool that you can see that it's a magnet. And if you had another layer there, it would have affected like how strong these are. So that is just super glued on the back of essentially my very own like die cut chipboard type piece. If you had a chipboard piece, you know, if you had like a pack of stuff from a store, craft store, then you could just glue your magnet on the back of that, and then that would be sturdy enough. Can you see how thick that is? That's kind of like chipboard thickness. So this is what I'm going to have as my little closure piece. So the magnet is on the back of there, as I mentioned. The other magnet is behind here. I haven't glued it down yet. I was just testing about where I want to have it. That is glued underneath this piece of paper that we had here. So I did have to bring this up a little bit, as you can see, because I didn't think about magnets when I started filming today. But I thought it was going to be a really, really cool little idea. So I'm going to carefully just pop some glue on the back here. Whoop, try not to get it everywhere, Justine. There we go, gloopy glue. So I'm not using super glue on the back of here. I think that would be overkill. I did use super glue on that chipboard piece because if you're going to be using that to, you know, open and close the window, then I did feel like it needed a little bit more protection. And basically I'm just going to glue this underneath the paper. Now there might be a little bit of a bump, but if I'm careful about it, I don't think it will be noticeable. But isn't that such a fun little idea? So yeah, I did not plan to do magnets when I started coming up with the idea for this window page, but it was just because those shutters, I had the idea for the shutters and it was like, oh, they're gonna just stick up and get in somebody's way, so that's not so good. And then yeah, the magnets. How fun is that? I mean, come on. It's a decoration, so now that looks like, you know, it's meant to be like that. But it's also a functional piece to give you this actual interactive element. It does add bulk. It does add a little bit of bulk, but because those are thin magnets, it doesn't add a ton. So as I mentioned, these are just magnets I had in my stash, but I know somebody will ask me what kind of thickness they are. I want to say they're about 1 millimeter thick, so they're super thin, but they're just what we had. So there you go. That is my little magnet closure, so a bonus little technique to try. And then over here, I have this digital that I mentioned with the roses from my Peachtree Lane kit. So I was going to have that. I've got a scrap here from my She Wonders kit, which brings in some of the green, as well as a little bit of pattern. So I thought that would be interesting. And then I thought to use, I had this little bit of a scrap. And as you can see, I've done all of the tearing, so, you know, I just tore it the way the paper wanted to go, so nothing fancy in terms of the way that it is, but, you know, we have a little bit of a curve. Anyway, this is the same picture as what's in the window. I thought if I slip that down there, you can see the little bit of hint of pink. So we've got a nice bit of green and pink reflected on both pages, which I think works really well. So that is what I'm going to go with. So yeah, I know that I didn't film the whole process of doing the magnets. I did just have to essentially just test that my idea was going to work. I've never used magnets as a closure before. I have seen other people do it, but I've never done it myself. So I wasn't sure how that was going to go. So I thought I'll just, you know, build up my little chipboard piece, make sure I'm happy with everything, and then yeah, just show you how I've gone about doing it. So I hope that's given you some bonus ideas of something that you can try. So let's get these glued down. I would have done this off screen as well, but I felt like it would have been useful for you to see the different layers of how I was going about making this, you know, very, very simple, basic collage. I realised with the page that has the bunnies on, so the hydrangea page from before, so the last video, there was something about it that I wasn't so keen on, and I couldn't put my finger on why, because I was very happy with the hydrangeas, very happy with the bunnies, very happy with the little bit of extra fussy cuts and bits and bobs that I added. And I realised it was because all the way through the book I've been using lots and lots of collaging. So, you know, I've had scraps of paper and I've been, you know, doing all kinds of fun things like that. And I realised that I hadn't done it on the bunnies page. So now that I've realised that, it will be much easier for me to decorate some of the writing pages, because I feel like the torn bits of paper, like what I'm adding here and stuff, I do feel like it just adds that little bit of interest to a page compared to, you know, just sticking a digital down. As nice as they are, as nice as many of the digitals are that we use, yeah, I feel like sometimes layering them up like so with, you know, different torn edges and things like that, it just adds a lot of interest. So if you've been having any issues with your pages where you're thinking well, it just looks a bit flat or a bit boring or not quite what you're after, then I would say to you, have a go at tearing pages and layering them up and stuff, and just see how you get on with that. Because for me, it's the easiest and quickest, simplest way to just to add that little bit of interest to a page. Without, it's decorating and collaging, but you're not having to think too hard about what you're doing, in my opinion anyway. So something like that. I can do the finicky gluing after. I have this butterfly from the Edith Holden books, which I thought could go somewhere there somehow. Whoop, getting stuck to me. There we go. So something like that. I would have liked it to have been flying towards my secret garden. But I feel like it's missing something. So I still need to do the stenciling, my T-ring stencils and stuff. So that could be something. The other alternative is I usually add, words and labels and things. But because I have this here, I kind of feel like I don't want to add another word. If you're ever in doubt, do your stenciling. So I've just gone around done lots and lots of T-ring stenciling because I felt like it was a little bit, just felt a little bit plain. So I've done that. And it can still be, they're still writing pages and all of that. Now I'm just going to add my little butterflies. So I've got a bit of the yellow coming through there as well, again. And yeah, I did say about a word, but I think having it on the other side, so here rather than there, it does kind of like a little bit of a mirror effect, which I quite like. So I think that works quite well. So I'm going to glue the word down first. So this is just a label, and seeing as my birthday's very nearly coming up soon, in the next couple of weeks, yeah, I felt like I would use the label that says August 30th. So there we go. This is what somebody saw. August 30th. They were thinking about their secret garden and the butterflies were coming out and all of that was going on. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing, two different techniques, window and magnet closures and things like that. So let's just make sure my wings can, have a little bit of 3D to them. Yeah, I think that's looking really nice. I like all of that. I still need to get in with the little bits of extra gluing, but that's okay. So I felt like, even though I wanted to keep this as writing space, I just felt like it was missing a little something. I tried fussy cuts and rub-ons and different things, but nothing was really working. So in the end, I decided to add some little crochet trim pieces to my shutters. So you can see it hanging out the side here when you open them up. And it just adds that little bit of detail just on the page. It brings in some cream and cream here, so now we've got, a whole thing going on. I will say it does affect my magnet closure just a tad, a teensy bit, but I don't think it's enough that it doesn't work anymore. It is holding it closed, which is the main thing. It just wants to kick up a little bit because there is more bulk there now. It might flatten down and stuff with time. At the end of the day, I'm going to close the book very soon. But essentially that is that. And what I really like is when you open up the windows, you can still see my butterflies. And then we've got some more of the terracotta sort of colours. So I think as a whole, it works really, really well. So that is that. So the next step, oh, there we go, didn't get it in the right place. So I'm just going to move that. So the next step is to just basically do what we've been doing and glue our pages together. So I'm just going to make sure that's out of the way. So we're going to come along and just put some glue in the spine. So that's a nice strong glue. And then we're going to, I'm staying away from the window. We don't want to see the glue through that. So just, bear that in mind. So I'm just keeping an eye on where my window is. In fact, it will be easier actually if I come along here, like so. I can see that I'm not going in the window, I'm not going super close to it. I'm giving it enough space. Can always add more glue later if we need to. Okay, and then just like before, what we're going to do is just lift up our pages and then just glue those together. Just help it all lay down the way that it wants to be. Just make sure I've not got any glue seeping out, so just keep an eye on that as well. And there you go. That is the window page with magnet closure. Now if you do decide to do this and you decide to add, you know, crochet trim or what have you, just double check that your magnets are strong enough to allow you to do that. And if not, you might need to reposition the magnets over slightly. Like if the magnet had been more like that, it probably would have worked better. Oh, there you go. I didn't have the magnet in the right place. It does work. There we go. Yeah. And you know, it adds a little bit of bulk, but it's still doable, you know. I know we haven't added all of the ephemera pieces yet, but all of the ephemera will be very, very thin pieces that I'm adding, where I have got pockets. But a lot of the pages that we do have, you know, some of them have pockets, but not all of them do. And, you know, where we haven't got a pocket, we've got little extra details like this. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed seeing that come together. I really love how that's turned out. I did not expect to do a magnet closure. As far as I got was window plus shutters, and then go from there. But we have the green repeated, we've got the cream repeated, we have the terracotta sort of colours repeated, we've even got the same pattern there. So that really helps. Repeating colours and patterns and, you know, different things like that can help. And then, yeah, a bonus as a magnet closure, which I hope you've enjoyed seeing how I went about doing that. So easy peasy once you know what you're doing. And it's just an added extra little interactivity and fun little thing that you can do in these types of books. You know, it doesn't all have to be, you know, flat and samey. We can change things up as we go through, as we work on them. And because we're going, you know, a double page at a time, it allows us the freedom then to experiment and play and take our time with each individual page together, like the 2 pages together, as opposed to trying to do an entire season in one sitting. There's no reason why you couldn't do that, but you might have more fun experimenting with page by page, and it just allows you to try a few different things. Gives you the freedom, I think. Alrighty then, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.